This is James Carter. Susan John is here with me on the Last Signal radio. This broadcast is coming to you through emergency relays, backup transmitters, and whatever fragments of infrastructure are still standing. We are not certain how long this signal will hold. We are certain of one thing only. The Yellowstone caldera has erupted. This is not a drill. This is not elevated volcanic activity. This is a full-scale VEI-8 supervolcano eruption, the largest geological event in recorded human history. At approximately 35 minutes ago, seismic stations across the western United States registered a synchronized rupture beneath Yellowstone National Park. 15 to 20 minutes later, the ground failed. The eruption column rose faster than any model predicted. The initial blast was heard across 5 states. Windows shattered hundreds of miles away. What followed was silence on every channel inside a 100-mile radius. Entire towns, West Yellowstone, Gardiner, Cody, Jackson, Bozeman, Idaho Falls, went dark at once. No voices, no signals, no survivors reporting in. Susan, the caldera didn't just erupt, it emptied.
James, what we're seeing now confirms the worst-case scenario scientists warned about for decades but never truly expected to witness. The ash column is no longer climbing. It is punched through the stratosphere. Early satellite data shows it exceeding 40 miles in height and spreading outward at extraordinary speed. This is not localized. This is continental. Within the immediate kill zone, roughly 100 miles from the caldera, everything was erased in minutes. Pyroclastic flows moved faster than evacuation vehicles, faster than aircraft, faster than fear itself. Temperatures reached nearly 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no shelter that can withstand that. Communications from hospitals, ranger stations, military posts, everything inside that radius ceased simultaneously. FEMA has issued instructions to shelter in place, seal homes, and not evacuate because roads are already lethal. Ashfall has begun hundreds of miles away, turning daylight into darkness. James, people need to understand, this is not a disaster we recover from. This is the opening chapter of a planetary collapse.
Suzanne, we are already receiving fragmented casualty estimates, and they are staggering. Initial models place hundreds of thousands dead within the first hour alone, possibly more. That number is rising by the minute as secondary effects cascade outward. Power grids across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho are failing. Water systems are compromised. Hospitals are overwhelmed or offline. All non-essential air traffic nationwide has been grounded. Ash ingestion destroys jet engines in seconds. This eruption released more than 240 cubic miles of material in its opening phase alone. To put that in human terms, Mount St. Helens was a pinprick compared to this. The ground beneath Yellowstone has collapsed inward. A depression several miles deep is forming where a national park used to exist. And Susan, seismic activity has not stopped. This is not a single event. This is a system unraveling.
And James, we need to be honest with people listening right now, because false hope is more dangerous than fear. Ash is not smoke. It is pulverized rock and glass. Breathing it shreds lung tissue. It collapses roofs. It destroys engines, electronics, generators, anything with moving parts. Cities as far as Billings are already reporting total darkness and zero visibility. Water supplies are at immediate risk of contamination. If you are hearing this and you are outside the kill zone, your priorities are simple and brutal. Shelter indoors, seal every opening, conserve water, and prepare for extended power loss. Do not expect help to arrive. Emergency systems are failing faster than they can respond. This ash cloud is already spreading across multiple states, and within hours it will reach places that never imagined they would be touched by Yellowstone. James, the scale of this, it's beyond anything civilization has ever faced.
Susan, We are receiving confirmation now from USGS volcanologists that this eruption qualifies as an extinction-level event. They are not using that language lightly. The sulfur dioxide injection into the atmosphere is unprecedented. Hundreds of millions of tons. This will block sunlight. This will collapse agriculture. This will trigger a volcanic winter lasting years. What we are witnessing is the end of the climate stability that allowed modern civilization to exist at all. Governments are already declaring states of emergency, but the truth is their authority is collapsing alongside infrastructure. Martial law will not stop ash from falling. Borders will not stop hunger. And we need to say this clearly. The world you went to sleep in last night no longer exists.
James, people are going to ask what comes next. The honest answer is uncertainty, suffering, and choices no one should ever have to make. But even now, especially now, human behavior still matters. Cooperation matters. Truth matters. Panic will kill faster than hunger in the early hours. We will continue broadcasting as long as power allows, documenting what is happening and what it means, not to frighten you, but because someone has to bear witness. Because history, if it survives at all, deserves an honest record of how this ended, and how some people tried to help one another as it did.
Suzanne, the sky is no longer behaving like a sky. Reports are coming in from Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas describing something closer to night than weather. Ashfall has intensified to the point where daylight has been completely erased in cities more than 150 miles from Yellowstone. Billings, Casper, Rapid City, these places are effectively blind. Visibility is near zero. Vehicles abandoned mid-road. Emergency crews unable to move without destroying their engines. What people are breathing right now is not smoke. It is microscopic shards of volcanic glass. Hospitals that are still functional are reporting respiratory failure in patients who were healthy an hour earlier. Power substations are tripping offline under ash load. Cell towers are failing. This isn't panic causing the blackout. This is physics. Infrastructure was never designed for sustained ashfall at this scale. Susan, we are watching modern systems fail in real time, not from explosions, but from weight, abrasion, and suffocation.
James, and that suffocation is already translating into mass casualties well outside the initial blast zone. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed not just by burns or trauma, but by people who simply cannot breathe. N95 masks are gone. Oxygen supplies are running out. Some hospitals are reporting they have minutes of generator fuel left because ash has clogged intake systems. And the public needs to hear this clearly. Evacuation is no longer a viable strategy for most people. Roads are death traps. Ash causes engines to seize within miles. Helicopters cannot fly. Planes cannot fly. Even walking outdoors without protection is causing lung injury. FEMA's shelter-in-place guidance isn't about safety. It's about reducing the rate of death. Water systems are now being shut down preemptively as ash infiltrates reservoirs and treatment plants. If you have containers, fill them. If you have bathtubs, fill them. After this window closes, dehydration will become as lethal as the eruption itself.
Susan, we're also seeing the first signs of cascading grid failure across multiple states. When power goes, everything else follows. Communications, refrigeration, medical equipment, water pumps. Grocery stores are already being stripped bare, not by mobs, but by silence. Freezers warming, food spoiling, systems offline. Emergency services are making impossible decisions about where to respond and where to abandon entirely. And above all of this, the ash cloud continues to spread, fast. Atmospheric tracking now confirms it is moving eastward and northward simultaneously, crossing state lines without resistance. This is not a plume you wait out in hours. This is a continental blanket. Susan, the phrase temporary disruption no longer applies. We are witnessing the early stages of systemic collapse, and it's happening faster than any emergency framework was designed to handle.
James, there's another dimension people aren't fully grasping yet, and that's psychological. Darkness in the middle of the day breaks something fundamental in the human mind. Emergency hotlines are reporting panic attacks, confusion, people walking into traffic they can't see, parents losing children in ash-filled streets. Schools and workplaces that attempted to shelter in place are now trapped without information or supplies. And we're beginning to hear about fires, secondary fires caused by electrical faults and generators overheating under ash load. Fire departments cannot reach them. Even if they could, water pressure is failing, so fires burn unchecked, consuming oxygen already made scarce by particulate-filled air. This is not one disaster layered on another. It's a single expanding event that attacks every human dependency at once. Air, water, light, movement, trust.
Susan, casualty modeling is being revised upward again. What began as hundreds of thousands is now trending toward millions as secondary deaths accelerate. These are not dramatic deaths. They are quiet ones. Asthma attacks, heart failures, roof collapses under ash weight, traffic accidents in total darkness. Hospitals that are still transmitting are reporting staff collapse, doctors and nurses working until they physically cannot stand, then being replaced by no one. And we need to be honest about this. There will be no surge capacity. There will be no cavalry. The federal government is issuing statements, but the machinery that turns words into action is already failing in large sections of the country. Susan, this is the moment where the distance between affected and unaffected disappears.
And James, as that distance disappears, social behavior begins to change. We're receiving early reports of confrontations over masks, water, generators. Small conflicts now, but they matter because they show how quickly cooperation can fracture under fear. At the same time, there are also reports of neighbors sealing buildings together, sharing filtration, pooling food. Both realities exist at once. Which one dominates will decide how many survive the next phase. Medical experts are warning that ash inhalation injuries will continue worsening even for those indoors if ventilation is not sealed. Tape, plastic, cloth, anything to slow air exchange. This is not about comfort, it's about buying time. Every hour matters now.
Suzanne, military coordination is beginning to show strain as well. Bases in the western states are reporting reduced visibility, grounded aircraft, and compromised runways. National Guard units are being mobilized, but movement is limited and communications are inconsistent. The phrase being used internally is operational blindness. You cannot command what you cannot see, and right now, vast areas of the country are effectively invisible. Satellite feeds are degraded by ash interference. Ground reports are fragmentary. Decision makers are acting with incomplete information, and that increases the risk of catastrophic mistakes. This is no longer just a natural disaster. It's a stress test on every system of authority humans have built.
James, and while authority struggles, the atmosphere continues its work. Scientists confirm that the volume of sulfur dioxide injected into the upper atmosphere is already approaching levels associated with historic global cooling events, but this time, on a far larger scale. Sunlight reduction is measurable, now not theoretical. Temperatures are dropping even in regions untouched by ashfall. Crops that were days from harvest are being lost in hours. Livestock are suffocating in open fields. This is the moment when the eruption stops being an American catastrophe and becomes a global one. Other nations are watching, calculating, and realizing that their food systems are tied to what just happened in a national park that no longer exists.
Susan, if there is a single message people need to hear right now, it's this. The next phase will not announce itself with an explosion. It will arrive quietly through hunger, cold, disease, and exhaustion. What people do in the next few hours, how they shelter, who they trust, what they conserve, will echo for months, maybe years, for those who make it through. We will continue broadcasting as long as we can, documenting what is unfolding and what it means, because silence helps no one. Darkness is spreading, but information still matters.
And James, to anyone still listening, you are not imagining the fear you feel. This is unprecedented, but panic will shorten your odds. Stay indoors, protect your air, protect your water. Find others if you can do so safely. History may remember this moment as the beginning of the end, but it will also remember whether people chose to become enemies or lifelines. We will stay with you, as long as the signal holds.
Susan, the numbers are changing faster than we can speak them. Every new model replaces the last before it finishes loading. What began as hundreds of thousands dead is now being revised into the millions, and those are only the deaths we can still count. Federal analysts are quietly admitting that the concept of an accurate casualty figure may already be obsolete. Communications gaps are widening. Entire regions have gone silent. Not because everyone is dead, but because there is no longer a way to ask. Hospitals across the Midwest are reporting patient volumes 5 to 10 times capacity, then abruptly going offline as generators fail or staff collapse. These are not dramatic final moments. These are people dying on floors, in hallways, in parking lots, while the ash keeps falling. Suzanne, this is the phase where death becomes statistical, because the individual stories are too many to tell.
James, doctors who are still transmitting are using language I've never heard before outside of battlefield medicine. They are talking about resource extinction. Oxygen tanks empty, ventilators useless without power, medications locked behind automated systems that no longer function. Triage protocols have shifted from who can be saved to who will die slowest without help. Children with asthma, elderly patients with heart conditions, burn victims from secondary fires. These are not edge cases anymore. They are the majority. And something else is happening. Healthcare workers themselves are becoming casualties. We're hearing of nurses collapsing mid-shift, doctors coughing blood, entire emergency departments abandoned not out of fear but physical incapacity. When the healers fall, the death curve steepens sharply.
Suzanne, transportation-related fatalities are accelerating as well. We're receiving reports of multi-car pileups on highways where visibility dropped to 0 in seconds. Trains stranded between stations. Subway systems flooded or shut down as power failed. In some cities, people attempting to flee on foot are collapsing from ash inhalation within blocks. And layered on top of this is structural failure. Ash accumulation is heavier than snow, much heavier. Roofs are beginning to give way across wide areas, especially older buildings and large commercial structures. Warehouses, shopping centers, schools. Each collapse adds dozens or hundreds more dead, often without anyone left alive to report it.
James, the phrase secondary casualties no longer fits. These deaths are now primary outcomes of the eruption, and they are accelerating. Analysts estimate that by the 6-hour mark, total U.S. deaths may already be in the 2 to 3 million range. By 8 hours, projections climb into the tens of millions once social breakdown is factored in, and that breakdown has begun. Emergency call logs show a sharp rise in violent incidents, not organized crime, but desperation. People fighting over generators, bottled water, sealed buildings. Law enforcement agencies are openly stating they cannot respond to most calls. Officers are sheltering with their families or trapped like everyone else. Authority is thinning, James. Not collapsing yet, but thinning to the point where it cannot shape events.
Suzanne, FEMA coordination centers are still issuing updates, but behind the language you can hear the strain. Distribution hubs are overwhelmed before they're even operational. Convoys can't move through ash-choked roads. National stockpiles exist on paper, but logistics require fuel, drivers, visibility, and time, none of which are available in sufficient quantity. Some state governments are effectively offline. Governors unreachable. Emergency operations centers abandoned or destroyed. We are entering a phase where governance exists only in fragments, unevenly distributed, and often too late to matter. The systems built to save millions in disasters were never designed for a disaster that kills millions per hour.
And James, there's another silent multiplier here: chronic illness. Dialysis patients without power. Diabetics without insulin refrigeration. Cancer patients mid-treatment. People who, in normal times, survive because civilization supports them. That support has vanished almost overnight. These deaths don't look like disasters on camera. They happen in bedrooms, in darkened apartments, in quiet houses sealed against the ash. Families watching loved ones fade because the pharmacy is closed and the roads are impassable. This is how the numbers explode without explosions. This is how a society bleeds out.
Susan, economists and demographers are now being pulled into emergency briefings, not to plan recovery, but to estimate survivability. One internal document we've seen uses language that is chilling in its simplicity. Population correction underway. By the 10-hour mark, worst-case projections suggest 40 to 50 million Americans dead, roughly 15% of the population. By 12 hours, that number could double. These aren't predictions meant for the public, but the data is leaking because containment of information is failing along with everything else. People sense the truth even without numbers. You can feel it in the silence between updates.
James, globally, governments are watching these figures and recalculating their own futures. Stock markets have ceased meaningful operation. Currency exchanges are frozen. International aid is no longer being discussed, only border control and internal stability. The eruption has forced a brutal realization. There is no outside help coming for anyone. Every nation is now its own lifeboat, and many of those lifeboats are already taking on water. This is the moment where the disaster stops being an event and becomes a condition, something the world now lives inside of.
Suzanne, as grim as this sounds, clarity still matters. Understanding the scale of loss is not about despair. It's about preparation. The faster people accept that the old systems are gone, the faster they can adapt to what remains. Community-level survival, shared resources, honest communication. Those are not inspirational slogans anymore. They are mathematical advantages. We will keep counting as long as counting is possible. We will keep speaking as long as there is power, because silence at this stage would be its own kind of death.
And to those still listening, if you are alive right now, you are already among the survivors of the opening phase. That does not guarantee anything, but it means your choices still matter. Protect your lungs, protect your water, stay connected to others where you can. The body count will continue to rise, but humanity is not yet finished speaking. Neither are we.
Susan, something fundamental has changed over the last hour, and people across the country are noticing it even if they don't have the words yet. The sky is dimming, not from clouds, not from weather, but from absence. Sunlight itself is being filtered out. Atmospheric instruments now confirm that the ash plume has spread far enough and thick enough to measurably reduce incoming solar radiation across much of North America. Noon is starting to resemble dusk. Temperatures are falling in places untouched by ashfall. Farmers are reporting frost forming in fields that should be warm. This is the moment scientists feared most. Not the explosion, not the ash, but the silence that follows when the planet's energy balance is disrupted. Susan, the sky is no longer giving us what it always has.
James, the confirmation just came in from multiple climate monitoring centers. Sulfur dioxide concentrations in the stratosphere have exceeded anything measured in modern history. We are now officially in the early stages of a volcanic winter. That phrase used to sound abstract, almost academic. It is not abstract now. These sulfur aerosols are reflecting sunlight back into space, and they will not settle out in days or weeks. We are talking about years. Crop scientists are warning that the current growing season is effectively over across much of the northern hemisphere. Corn, wheat, soy, entire harvests are failing in place. Livestock are dying in the fields from ash inhalation and cold stress. Food production is collapsing before the food shortages have even had time to be felt. James, famine is no longer a future threat. It has a start time.
Suzanne, global reaction has shifted from shock to containment. Nations are sealing borders not out of hostility, but panic. Canada and Mexico have both suspended civilian crossings. European governments are grounding flights and stockpiling grain. Shipping lanes are already disrupted as ports close under ash contamination and fuel shortages. Markets are not crashing anymore. They've simply stopped functioning. Trading halts have turned into indefinite suspensions. Money assumes a future. Right now, the future is opaque. And with that opacity comes fear, not just among civilians, but among leaders who now realize that no policy lever can bring the sun back.
James, we're also receiving internal assessments from agricultural agencies that are difficult to even read aloud. Global crop yields are projected to drop by as much as 90% over the next several years if current conditions persist. Food reserves, even in wealthy nations, are measured in weeks, not years. Rationing plans exist, but they rely on transportation networks that are already failing. Refrigeration requires power, distribution requires fuel, order requires trust. All three are eroding simultaneously, and in poorer regions of the world where reserves were already thin, starvation is expected to begin almost immediately. This eruption did not just darken skies, it severed the chain that feeds billions of people.
Suzanne, the psychological effect of this dimming world cannot be overstated. Humans evolved under a predictable sun. When that rhythm breaks, so does something inside us. Mental health hotlines are overwhelmed with callers describing disorientation, despair, and a sense that time itself is wrong. Religious institutions are reporting crises of faith among leaders and followers alike. Scientists, people trained to be objective, are openly describing this as a mass extinction event in progress. Not a possibility, a process. And while the numbers still matter, the emotional weight of this realization is beginning to paralyze entire communities.
And James, as the sky grows quieter, governments are making decisions they hoped never to face. Emergency powers are expanding rapidly. Military units are being repositioned, not for war, but to secure food stores, energy facilities, and remaining infrastructure. Martial law is being declared in stages, sometimes announced, sometimes simply enacted, when armed checkpoints appear overnight. The intent is control, but the effect is often fear, and fear spreads faster than ash. At the same time, international cooperation is collapsing. The United Nations has suspended regular operations. The World Health Organization has issued what may be its final comprehensive advisory, acknowledging that global health coordination is no longer possible at scale.
Susan, another threat is quietly emerging beneath all of this. Nuclear infrastructure. Power plants require constant cooling. Cooling requires power, water, and trained staff. As grids fail and workers cannot reach facilities, the risk of meltdowns increases by the hour. We have unconfirmed reports of emergency shutdowns at several plants in the central and eastern United States, but shutdown does not mean safe. It means time-limited. Each additional disaster compounds the last, turning large regions into zones that may never be habitable again. The eruption did not just wound the planet, it destabilized everything layered on top of it.
James, what makes this phase so haunting is its quiet. There is no new explosion, no new sound, just a dimming world and the slow realization that growth, economic, agricultural, even biological, has been interrupted on a planetary scale. Children are asking when the sun will come back. Parents do not know how to answer. Teachers have stopped pretending school will resume. Long-term planning is being replaced with daily survival calculus. Who eats today? Who waits? Who might not make it through the night? These are not questions societies are meant to answer.
Suzanne, history books, if any are ever written again, will likely mark this as the point of no return. The moment when humanity understood that this was not a crisis to manage, but an ending to endure. And yet even now, people are still helping each other, sharing food, taking in strangers, writing things down in case someone someday wants to know what happened here. That impulse, to bear witness, to care, is perhaps the most human thing left in a darkening world.
And to anyone listening as the sky fades above you, the silence you're feeling is real, but it is not empty. You are still here. Others are still here. What survives now will not be measured in cities or nations, but in small acts of cooperation and memory. We will continue this broadcast as long as power and breath allow, because even as the sky falls silent, the truth still deserves a voice.
Susan, over the last hour, something irreversible has happened. Not in the sky, but on the ground. Borders are closing, not gradually, not diplomatically, abruptly. Canada, Mexico, the European Union, Russia, Australia. Every major power has suspended civilian crossings and sealed airspace. This is not coordination. It's reflex. Each nation acting alone, realizing at roughly the same time that movement now equals collapse. Refugees are no longer being processed. They're being turned away, sometimes with warning shots, sometimes with silence. Ports are shutting down under ash contamination and fuel scarcity. Shipping manifests are frozen mid-ocean. The global system that moved food, medicine, and people across continents has fractured into isolated blocks. Suzanne, globalization didn't fail slowly. It stopped.
James, inside those borders, governments are contracting inward. Emergency powers are expanding faster than legislatures contract. In several countries, civilian leadership has gone dark, either evacuated to continuity bunkers or simply unreachable. Military spokespeople are now the primary voices addressing the public, and even they are choosing words carefully, avoiding timelines, avoiding promises. The truth is being rationed like food. International cooperation as a concept is collapsing under the weight of scarcity. The United Nations has suspended all field operations. The World Health Organization has acknowledged it can no longer coordinate global response. What remains are fragments, local authorities making survival decisions with no higher guidance, no reinforcements, and no safety net.
Suzanne, mass migration has begun despite the closures. Not organized convoys, streams of people moving on foot, by bicycle, by anything that still moves. Cities are emptying not because they are unsafe, but because they are unsustainable. Food distribution has failed. Water pressure is gone. Heating is unreliable in a cooling world. But rural areas cannot absorb this influx. We are already receiving reports of towns turning people away at gunpoint, not out of cruelty, but arithmetic. There is not enough food, not enough shelter. Every additional person is a risk multiplier. This is how community fractures form, not from hatred, but from survival math.
James, and inside cities that can evacuate, the social contract is tearing. Police departments are issuing statements that boil down to this: we cannot protect you. Officers are sheltering with families or redeployed to guard infrastructure rather than people. Prisons and detention centers are becoming liabilities as power and food fail. In some regions, inmates are being released simply because there is no way to hold them. In others, facilities have gone silent entirely. Rumors of massacres and riots are circulating, some confirmed, many not, but rumor itself is now a weapon. Fear spreads faster than information ever did.
Susan, the military is now operating under what internal documents describe as domestic containment posture. That means checkpoints, curfews, controlled movement of supplies. It also means triage, deciding which regions receive fuel, which hospitals receive generators, which populations are considered viable to support. These decisions are being made quickly, under pressure, and with incomplete data. There is no moral framework that makes this clean. Some areas will simply be left to fail. Not announced. Just not supported. History will debate these choices if anyone is left to write it.
And James, globally, the same pattern is repeating. Governments are collapsing not from invasion, but from hunger and loss of legitimacy. Protests are erupting over rationing, then turning violent when rations run out. Coups are being reported in parts of Africa, South America, and Central Asia as militaries seize control to maintain order, or what remains of it. Financial systems have effectively ceased operation. Banks are closed indefinitely. Digital records are inaccessible without power. People are realizing that wealth, as numbers on a screen, does not translate into calories or warmth. Value is being redefined hour by hour.
Suzanne, one of the most disturbing shifts we're tracking is the breakdown of time horizons. Governments are no longer planning for months or years. They're planning for days, sometimes hours. Strategic reserves are being opened not to save civilization, but to soften the initial collapse. Once those reserves are gone, there is no resupply, no harvest coming, no recovery season. This is the point where leaders stop asking, how do we fix this? And start asking, who survives this? Often without saying it aloud.
James, and within that narrowing world, human behavior is diverging sharply. In some places, communities are forming councils, sharing food, documenting knowledge, protecting the vulnerable. In others, violence is becoming normalized. Aid distribution points are turning into flashpoints, stampedes, shootings, fires. We are hearing early reports of people being killed not for supplies, but to reduce competition for them. This is not widespread yet, but it is growing, and once that line is crossed, it is very hard to uncross.
Suzanne, the phrase "no safe zones" is now being used openly by analysts. Not because danger is everywhere at once, but because stability is nowhere guaranteed. Ash, cold, hunger, disease, and human desperation respect no borders. Every place is temporary now, every shelter provisional. The world is closing not just geographically, but socially. Trust shrinking to family, then to individuals. That contraction may decide the shape of what comes next.
And to anyone listening as doors close and routes disappear, this narrowing is not your failure. It is the consequence of a planet pushed beyond its margins. Survival now depends on adaptability, cooperation, and restraint. Violence will feel tempting. It will promise certainty, but it will consume resources faster than any famine. Choose carefully who you stand with. Choose carefully who you protect. The world is smaller now, but your choices still echo.
Susan, the phrase martial law has now lost its formal meaning. What we're seeing across the country isn't an orderly transfer of authority. It's fragmentation. Checkpoints appear without clear command. Curfews are announced and then unenforced. Military units operate on partial information, sometimes cut off from higher command for hours at a time. In several states, governors are confirmed deceased or unreachable, and emergency succession protocols have failed. Authority is no longer vertical. It's local, improvised, and inconsistent. In some places, that means stability. In others, it means chaos enforced at gunpoint. This is the phase where order doesn't fall all at once. It shatters differently everywhere.
James, the collapse of utilities has pushed millions into immediate survival mode. Power grids across multiple regions are permanently offline now, not temporarily down. Water pumps have failed. Sewage systems are backing up. Entire neighborhoods are becoming uninhabitable due to contamination alone. Dehydration deaths are being reported within days, not weeks. Without refrigeration, remaining food supplies rot quickly. People are eating whatever they can, expired food, pet food, livestock feed. And with hunger comes violence. We are receiving confirmed reports of armed confrontations over food stores, generators, and sheltered buildings. Law enforcement response times, where response exists at all, are measured in days.
Suzanne, hospitals that survived the first waves are now closing en masse. Not because patients stopped arriving, but because there is nothing left to give them. Oxygen is gone. Antibiotics are gone. Sterile conditions are impossible. Some facilities have issued final notices and evacuated staff. Others have simply gone silent. Bodies are being left where they fall because there is no fuel, no manpower, and no safe way to move them. This is accelerating disease spread, cholera, dysentery, typhoid. Public health experts warn that epidemics are no longer preventable, only survivable for some. Civilization's most basic promise, to care for the sick, has failed.
And James, something deeply unsettling is emerging in survivor reports. Normalization. Violence is becoming routine. Death is becoming background noise. People are stepping over bodies without stopping because stopping costs calories and time. Aid workers, what few remain, are making decisions that would have been unthinkable days ago. Who gets water? Who doesn't? Who is left behind because they can't walk? These choices are not made by monsters. They are made by exhausted humans with no good options left. That's what makes this phase so dangerous, not evil, but erosion.
Susan, we need to address a subject many authorities are avoiding: starvation behavior. Food scarcity is now severe enough in several regions that reports of cannibalism are emerging. These are not rumors anymore. Medical examiners and military units have confirmed cases. This is not widespread, but it is a signal. Historically, this only appears when social structures have completely collapsed and caloric intake drops below survival thresholds. Once it begins, it spreads not because people want it to, but because biology overrides taboo. This is how deep the collapse has already gone.
James, nuclear infrastructure is now a parallel emergency. Several power plants are operating on emergency cooling with limited staff and unstable power. In at least 2 cases, partial meltdowns are suspected, though confirmation is difficult due to communication failures. Radiation adds another invisible layer of danger, areas that look intact but are lethal to occupy. And beyond civilian plants, the military situation is growing more volatile. Command and control systems are degraded. Some units are operating without verified orders. Analysts warn that the risk of accidental or unauthorized weapons deployment, conventional or nuclear, is rising sharply. When systems designed for precision lose clarity, catastrophe follows.
Susan, financial systems are now irrelevant. Currency has no enforcement mechanism. Banks are closed indefinitely. Digital wealth is inaccessible without power or trust. Barter has emerged in pockets, but it's inefficient and dangerous. Theft is easier than trade when desperation peaks. Social cohesion, the invisible infrastructure, has eroded faster than roads or grids ever could. And once that cohesion breaks, rebuilding it becomes exponentially harder with every passing day.
James, yet even here, especially here, there are moments that resist the collapse. Communities that sealed together early are faring better. Shared labor, shared food, shared watch. People writing manuals by hand, teaching children by candlelight, recording what they know because knowledge is now as fragile as fuel. These places are rare, but they exist. They are proof that order doesn't only come from governments. Sometimes it comes from agreement. Quiet, stubborn agreement to stay human.
Susan, we are now past the point where recovery is a meaningful concept. This is endurance. This is adaptation under extinction pressure. The systems that defined modern life, healthcare, law, finance, mobility, are gone or going. What remains are people, choices, and time. Fewer choices, less time. But still, some agency. We will continue this broadcast as long as there is power and breath, not because we can stop what's happening, but because understanding it may help someone make it through another night.
And to anyone listening in a world without rules, restraint is now a survival skill. Cooperation is now technology. Memory is now inheritance. What you preserve, food, knowledge, compassion, may outlast everything else. The order you build locally may be the only order left. We are still here. The signal still holds for now.
Susan, we need to correct something we said earlier. This was never a single eruption. Seismic activity beneath the Yellowstone region has intensified again, and what we're seeing now confirms a secondary rupture. A major earthquake, one of the strongest ever recorded in the continental United States, has fractured the remaining structure of the caldera. This was not an aftershock. This was a trigger. New vents have opened. Pressure that never fully released has found another path, and with it, another wave of destruction has been unleashed. Pyroclastic flows are forming again, moving outward at catastrophic speed. This is not ashfall. This is ground-hugging fire, hotter than anything humans can survive, moving faster than any evacuation could ever be organized.
James, the most urgent development right now is the trajectory of one of these flows towards Salt Lake City. Geological models and military sensors agree. The city is directly in its path. There is no evacuation window that matters. Roads are already impassable. Airlift is impossible. Communications from within the metropolitan area are fragmentary and fading. Salt Lake City is effectively sealed in place. Hundreds of thousands of people are there, sheltering, waiting, many of them hearing rumors but not understanding how little time there truly is. This is one of those moments where knowledge does not equal safety. Even perfect information cannot outrun what's coming.
Susan, emergency management officials are no longer issuing public guidance for the region. Not because they don't care, but because there is nothing actionable to say. You cannot shelter from a pyroclastic flow. You cannot breathe through it. You cannot hide beneath it. It strips cities down to their foundations in moments. Temperatures exceed anything building materials can withstand. This is not destruction followed by fire. It is fire. And as communications drop, we are likely witnessing the last transmissions from an entire major American city.
James, this secondary event has confirmed what volcanologists feared most. The system is unstable on a scale that makes prediction almost meaningless. Continuous seismic activity suggests additional ruptures are possible, not just near Yellowstone, but across connected fault systems. The ground beneath large portions of the western United States is under stress it has not experienced in human history. That means today's catastrophe may not be the last. It also means that areas previously considered safe are no longer safe by definition. Stability is gone, not temporarily, but structurally.
Susan, casualty projections are being revised again, and at this point the numbers are almost beside the point. Entire population centers are being removed from the map faster than they can be counted. The loss of Salt Lake City alone represents not just lives, but logistics. Fuel depots, data centers, transportation hubs, food storage. Every city that falls accelerates collapse elsewhere. This is how extinction events propagate. Not in a single blow, but in cascading losses that remove the scaffolding holding everything else up.
And James, the emotional impact of this second eruption is profound. We're hearing despair in voices that were still composed earlier. Emergency responders breaking down on open channels. Scientists openly grieving on air. This was the moment many were secretly hoping would not come. The confirmation that the eruption is not done with us. That the planet itself is still moving, still releasing energy, still reshaping the surface beneath our feet without regard for what we built on top of it.
Susan, military coordination has taken another hit. Units stationed in the region have lost command contact. Some are acting autonomously, others retreating, others simply disappearing from the network. Strategic planners are now forced to account for the possibility that large sections of the country may become permanently uninhabitable. Not for years, but for generations. Ash depth, radiation from secondary disasters, and continuing seismic instability make long-term occupation unrealistic. Maps are being redrawn in real time, not to show borders, but to mark absence.
James, we also need to talk about what this does to hope. People held on through the first eruption believing that once the blast passed, the worst was over. This second fire destroys that illusion. It tells the truth in the harshest possible way. This event has momentum, and momentum does not negotiate. Survival now depends less on plans and more on position. Where you are, what resources you already have, who is with you. That reality is sinking in everywhere at once.
Susan, if this broadcast ends suddenly, It may not be because we chose to stop. Power is unstable. Relays are failing. But we will continue as long as even a fragment of the network remains. Because moments like this, when cities vanish and the ground itself turns hostile, must be recorded. Not for governments, not for history books, but for whoever survives long enough to ask what happened here.
And to anyone listening near the path of this second fire, if you can hear us, know that you are not being ignored or forgotten. The silence coming is not abandonment. It is physics. It is scale. It is a force no voice can cut through. You mattered, you still matter, and the world that follows will carry your absence whether it wants to or not.
Susan, daylight has become unreliable. That is not a metaphor. Across vast portions of the northern hemisphere, the sun is now a dim presence, filtered through layers of volcanic ash, thick enough to register on radar. Midday looks like dusk. In some regions, it never brightens at all. Satellites confirm what people are already seeing from the ground. A dense atmospheric veil encircling the planet, spreading eastward and southward, carried by jet streams that no longer matter in the way they used to. Temperatures are dropping rapidly. Crops that survived the initial eruptions are now failing under cold stress and lack of light. This is not a temporary shadow. This is the opening phase of a planetary winter.
James, climatologists are using language they've avoided their entire careers. They are no longer talking about cooling trends or short-term disruption. They are saying volcanic winter, openly, plainly. Global average temperatures are projected to fall several degrees within weeks, not years. Inland regions are already seeing snow where it should be summer. Growing seasons have collapsed almost overnight. Photosynthesis is slowing. That sentence alone should land hard. The basic process that feeds the planet is being throttled by the sky itself. Food security as a concept is unraveling.
Susan, supply chains were fragile before the eruptions. Now they are breaking cleanly. Grain exports have stopped. Fuel refining is compromised by ash contamination. Transportation corridors, rail, road, air, are either buried or shut down due to engine failures and zero visibility. Governments are invoking emergency rationing protocols, but implementation is uneven, and enforcement is already failing in places where authority has thinned. This is how scarcity turns abstract numbers into personal fear. Not tomorrow. Today.
James, we're also seeing a psychological shift that's impossible to ignore. Panic has burned itself out in many regions. Not because people feel safe, but because panic requires energy. What's replacing it is a quiet, heavy realization. The world people planned their lives around no longer exists. Schools are closed indefinitely. Financial markets are suspended without timelines. Long-term goals have evaporated. People are thinking in days and weeks now, some in hours. This is the mental climate change that follows the physical one.
Susan, energy grids are under strain from both ends. Demand is rising as temperatures fall, while generation capacity drops due to damaged infrastructure and fuel shortages. Rolling blackouts are becoming permanent outages. Once the lights go out in some areas, they do not come back. Communications depend on power. Power depends on coordination. Coordination depends on trust. You can hear the chain snapping link by link.
And James, there's another factor compounding all of this. Ash is not just blocking sunlight, it's poisoning systems. Water treatment plants are failing as filters clog. Respiratory illnesses are surging everywhere. The air remains breathable at all. Masks help, but only briefly. Long-term exposure is wearing people down. Hospitals that survived the initial disasters are now overwhelmed by slow, grinding illness rather than sudden trauma. This is attrition, quiet, relentless attrition.
Susan, some governments are discussing population consolidation, moving survivors into fewer, more defensible zones where heat, food, and medical care can be centralized. On paper, it makes sense. In reality, Movement at this scale is chaotic and dangerous. Not everyone will be allowed in. Not everyone will make it there. The moral weight of those decisions is already tearing leadership structures apart from the inside. Susan, as the planet cools and systems fail, the question is no longer how to save the world as it was. That opportunity has passed. The question now is whether pockets of humanity can endure long enough for the sky to clear, if it ever does. Volcanic winters have ended before, but none have occurred with 8 billion people depending on just-in-time systems to survive. This is uncharted ground.
And James, for anyone listening through the dark, measuring days by battery life and cold by how close you sit to others, understand this. Survival is no longer about strength or intelligence alone. It is about adaptability, about sharing when instinct says hoard, about staying human when circumstances encourage you not to. The long winter doesn't just test bodies. It tests what kind of species we actually are.
Suzanne, we have reached the final stage of this broadcast, not because the story ends, but because the world as we knew it has. Millions are already gone. Cities lie silent under ash. Rivers, once flowing with life, are clogged with debris. Crops that survived the initial eruption are now frozen or buried. Governments no longer function. Borders mean nothing. Power grids are dead. The systems humanity relied on, healthcare, transportation, finance, communication, are gone. What remains is survival, a raw, immediate, and unrelenting struggle. And in that struggle, every choice matters. Every act of cooperation, every ration of food, every hand extended to another may determine who lives another day.
James, even in the midst of collapse, glimpses of humanity endure. Communities that worked together early, shared resources, and protected their vulnerable members are faring better than isolated individuals. People are recording knowledge by hand. Seeds, books, medicine, and tools are being preserved for a future that is uncertain. Acts of courage, compassion, and ingenuity continue, even when surrounded by death and despair. The survivors of this cataclysm will not inherit cities, governments, or empires. They will inherit lessons, memories, and the responsibility to carry humanity forward in whatever form it can endure.
Susan, outside of these pockets, the scale of loss is staggering. Ashfall, volcanic winter, starvation, disease, and social breakdown have compounded into a mass extinction pressure. Entire species of mammals are at risk. Human population is projected to collapse dramatically, with billions at risk worldwide. Food production is decimated. Water supplies are compromised. Communities are fractured. And yet, even here, survival is possible, because life persists, and adaptation is inherent in those who remain. The future will be smaller, harsher, and more local, but it is not yet extinguished.
James, long-term survival depends on cooperation, knowledge preservation, and resilience. Those who can organize, share resources, and maintain humanity within themselves and their small communities will have the greatest chance to endure. Genetic diversity, access to food and clean water, and careful management of energy sources will define the next era of life on Earth. Civilization as it was has ended, but a new chapter may still be written by the survivors who learn from these lessons and carry them forward.
Susan, the final truth is this. The Yellowstone eruption has rewritten the rules of life on Earth. Humanity has been forced to confront the limits of its technology, governance, and preparedness. Most of what was considered essential, the infrastructure, the cities, the global systems, is gone or broken. But what remains is human. Courage, ingenuity, compassion, and memory. The survivors will rebuild not the world we lost, but the world they can endure. That is the signal we leave behind. The last signal.
James, to anyone still listening, the world is no longer what you expected, but it is what remains. Preserve each other. Protect knowledge. Share resources. Adapt. Endure. Your choices now echo not just through your own survival, but through the survival of life itself. The ash will settle. The sun will return eventually. And when it does, those who endure will carry the story, the knowledge, and the spark of humanity forward into the future. The world as we knew it is gone, but the human story may continue.